Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions regarding this watch. Today, we discuss a model launched back in 2004, and it was a real milestone for Richard Mille. This is the RM005 in white gold. The example you see here originally retailed in 2006. It is a full set watch. The predecessor to the RM10 is a smaller, more water-resistant timepiece that has a fascinating combination of features. First of which is its iconic design. It's not big though, smaller than the RM10. It's a democratic watch that can be worn by many different sizes of wrist, male and female. So if we measure side to side, it's 37.8 millimeters, but it's only 12.1 millimeters thick. Despite the appearance, it's actually thinner than a Rolex Daytona. From lug to lug, it's 45 millimeters, and one of the advantages of these RM watches, the cambered case back, means it fits beautifully. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, the RM5 has always been a better fit on my wrist than the RM10. It looks good. You can see even from over the top, which exaggerates the width of a watch, those lugs are still well inboard at the edge of my wrist. And you can see the same thing down the barrel. In fact, you can see it even better. This is always the definitive shot. And while it may appear that a sleeve would get hung up on something like that, reality is that it is so thin that even with a sheer case band, sleeves will slide up and over. I could actually recommend this without reservations for a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference and maybe even 13.5 if your wrist is flat across the top. The strap's an RM piece, fully integrated, and as you can see, fixed in place using screws, so it's not going to pop off. That's comforting. You can see that it continues the taper of the case profile, and initially it also continues the evacuated sort of recess of the case profile. It's a brand new RM factory strap, no crimping, no gouging, and it is attached to a model-specific pin buckle. This is a flourish that would disappear with time, but we are talking early days for RM on this watch. In profile, you can see that we've got a couple of different finishes here. We've got satin, we've got polish, and we've got media blast with RM signature spline screws. You can see the pin has a little recess in the buckle. Attention to detail. The case is nicely detailed as well, as we have this polished flank, the case back, polished flank to the bezel. We have this vertical satination, then we have these hollow columns that act as the passages through which the spline screws keep the case assembled. Vertical satination and profile will go around to the crown. You can see it is a combination of media blasted facets, so several different finishes, media blast, satin, and polish on this case. RM giving you a little kerf underneath so you could dig your nail in, and you could see that WG made this case a significant supplier to RM over the years and also a stakeholder. Now what's interesting here is that these early tonneau cases, these had 100-meter water resistance. Later on, it would be considerably less across different tonneau-style models, but in the early days, the RM5 came out of the gate with 100-meter rating to it, and that in spite of a push-down crown. That would later go away. Most RM watches that are not divers subsequent to this would be either 30 or 50 meters. It is white gold. You can see that to good effect. So if you want an RM watch but you don't like the toy-like feel of sapphire and titanium in combination, this is the way to go. There is a rubber shoulder around the crown that makes it easier to grip. Dial side, we've actually got a couple of different things going on. So we've got this primary cambered and shaped sapphire, and it's not easy to make a thing like this water resistant. So the engineering and assembly here is pretty impressive. You can see it matches the arc of the case, but also the shape of the bezel. Underneath that, there's a second sapphire. You can see on top of that sapphire are printed the numerals themselves, as well as the little frame for the date there. And then we have a carbon fiber flange outboard, and on that, we have the little luminescent indices. We'll do a lume shot so you can see this watch in the dark. Easy to read, including the seconds hand, which I appreciate. Now the dial is essentially one and the same, other than that underlying sapphire. It's one and the same as the top side of the RM005 movement, which is, I believe, on a Vaucher 3002 automatic base, but it has been highly customized. The aesthetic is all RM, and it's made of a unique material, grade 5 titanium, that is unique to RM versions of this movement. So you can see it's a very light movement. It's fixed to the case using elastomers, so there's some shock resistance inherent in that. You can see the hands at center feature a combination of media blast and polish for better contrast against this grayscale dial base. The movement features hacking, which is always useful. You could stop the seconds hand, synchronize to a reference time, and then there is a quick set. You can see the full date mechanism, including the jumper, the skeletonized wheel, and then that little white panel that allows the numerals to be shown in relief in an unusual vertically stacked style of date display. Turning it all over, you can see the movement. Now, an innovation that RM introduced that frankly has to be adjusted by a watchmaker, but when you go to your RM watchmaker, these little winglets can be adjusted to change the winding efficiency of the system. If you're very sedentary, you'll want to ratchet it up so it'll gather every stray movement while you sit at your desk. If you're super active and you want to preserve the system, well, you ratchet down the winding efficiency, and changing the polar moment of the turning force by moving these white gold masses is how that's done. Twin barrels, automatic winding, the power reserve is 50 to 55 hours, 32 joules. It is a 4 hertz beat rate. It's adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard of adjustment. You can see that all of the sapphires are clear, which is a change that was made later on these movements as they began to realize that the synthetic rubies were not exactly in step with the aesthetic. If you look super close, you'll see that there's still one that acts as the pivot for the anchor below the balance. But eventually, RM would swap out the capstones to make sure that on the dial you didn't have those ruby pivots and capstones on the balance staff, so you wouldn't have some sort of ruby stone on the dial that was out of step with the aesthetic of the rest of the watch. And initially they were built with the ruby jewels right there. Later on, as these watches went back for service and newer ones were manufactured, those would be swapped out so they wouldn't look weird. You can also see that the spline screws, which are a signature element of RM design, are also used to affix some of the hardware on the movement. Jumping back to the case back, you can see that this is all titanium, which is a very difficult material to work with. You can also see that at this point, the movements were not free-sprung, as we have a set of mobile curb pins for adjustment, and then we have what appears to be a Triovis-style micrometric adjustment system. And then you can see the Vaucher star below the balance. Richard Mille has always been an établisseur, so if you think about traditional watchmaking, basically the way Vacheron was for its first quarter millennium and the way most Swiss watch companies were, you first design the product, then you go out to your suppliers, and you buy the best example of a case, a dial, a movement, strap, buckle, everything, and then you put them together under your roof to make your product. Manufacture, that's overrated these days. RM has proved that it's more important to get the best parts, put them together in a way that is distinctive and enduring. And in terms of brand equity and iconic design, I don't think you can argue much has been more enduring since 2001 than Richard Mille's tonneau cases. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.